Hey everyone, today we are talking with Katie Macbride. She's a writer who has written for Rolling Stone, Playboy, Vice, BuzzFeed, Daily Beast, and countless others. Very talented writer, covers addiction, mental health, behavioral health, and she has a really interesting lens into how this pandemic is affecting people with addiction. So check this interview out. Really interesting stuff here. Hey,
Hi. Oh,
how are you?
apologies in advance.
No need. I have a 5-year-old, a dog, and a wife working from home. So
Oh man, that's
yeah,
intense.
no, it's great. I like that we've landed here.
Right.
Um, I'm super curious about this and how this is affecting addicts. And I really want to kind of hone in on that. So
I myself am a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober for 12 years, so a lot of my interest in what I cover comes from trying to help people who aren't alcoholics or addicts or have problems with substances understand what that is like, trying to talk a little bit about harm reduction and more inclusivity and sobriety, those kind of things, because I feel like addiction is still really misunderstood. There's a lot of really bad reporting that does nothing to help get rid of this stigma. So I've written for Rolling Stone, the Daily Beast, Playboy, and a bunch of other places, but I am freelance, so it's all over the place.
first of all, thank you. Thanks for doing this. Katie and I kind of anonymously know each other through social media and through mutual friends. So this is the first time we've actually connected, and I'm glad we did. Um, Katie wrote an article for BuzzFeed last week, I believe it was, called "How to Stay Sober During a Global Pandemic," and that's one of the things I really want to talk about now. I think it's a really important subject, and it's something, like you were saying in your intro. People who aren't addicts don't really understand it, and probably don't understand the weight of how much more this weighs on people, the complications that come with isolation and addiction. So I just want to hear, first of all, you're a recovering addict yourself. How is this affecting you in any way, or being 12 years sober, are you kind of, does it affect you like it would an addict who kind of is just in recovery now?
Yeah, it does and it doesn't all at the same time. So I had been, for the first like 9 years probably, was very involved in 12-step meetings, and that was a huge part of how I stayed sober. And then I sort of fell off of it a little bit. So not being able to go to in-person meetings is not a huge issue for me. But in general, the sort of dystopian nightmare that we find ourselves in is certainly gives you a lot of reason to think, well, like, it's the end of the world. Can I drink because it's the end of the
Mm.
world? Like, that seems like a good reason.
Do you think
So,
that's, are people kind of coming to grips with that, or that you think they're really, are people there?
I think that as an alcoholic, my brain will work really, really hard to find reasons that I should drink and that it's okay for me to. And um, and so everyone has their own different triggers, but certainly isolation is a big one for a lot of people, simply because you know, towards the end of drinking and using, or when things get really bad, you're often by yourself.
Hmm.
And because everyone else judges you when you are like, no, it seems right to drink half a bottle of vodka over the course of an evening. It was like not a thing that socially is very acceptable. So a
Yeah.
lot of people towards the end of their drinking and using isolate so they can do that how they want to without being judged. So that can be really triggering for people, because now you are alone in your apartment again, just like you were at,
Mm.
sort of the worst of your drinking. So it's just different things for different people. But anything that is like this sort of global anxiety and being cut off from, your loved ones, your support systems, all of that, whether or not it has to do with addiction, can start to bring out some sort of self-destructive or not super healthy behaviors.
Yeah. That's so in regards to, sorry, I'm just getting my head around all this. It's really powerful stuff. For Alcoholic Anonymous, what are they doing like to pivot? In the beginning of your article where it talks about, I think Corey or I think was the name, how they're used to 13 hours a week in face-to-face interaction to help them escape that isolation and help kind of quell some of those triggers. What, as a group, is AA doing to help people like that? Like, is there something in place for a situation like this?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that there has been in the past. I don't think there was sort of a plan for if and when this happened, but when it did, there's like a ton of Zoom meetings. People say that they're, calling people and actually talking on the phone, whereas maybe they would have texted before. They now, since they're not getting that in-person connection, they want to call and have a longer conversation. But it's certainly different, and there have been some issues. I just recently I found out about this after I did my article. I think it's a relatively new issue where like all these trolls and people on Discord or whatever are like 4chan and Discord are now like deliberately trolling AA meetings. So they're going in there and like posting pictures of alcohol or calling women ugly or just like being as trolly as they possibly can. And it's not specific to recovery meetings. I think they're doing it in all kinds of, I saw an author say on Twitter, she's Asian American, and like she was doing some sort of reading or literary event and they all came in and were being extremely racist. And so, I think that actually concerns me more than the lack of in-person meetings, because I do feel like the majority of the people that I spoke to said like, yeah, it's not perfect, but hey, at least we have these online meetings, it'll do in a pinch kind of a thing. Like we're making it work.
But is that prevalent? And is that mostly, because I was reading some articles today and yesterday about how Zoom is being, what do they call, Zoom bombed or whatever it is?
Yeah, like, which is such a terrible nails on chalkboard word. You're just like, why is this a thing?
Yeah, it's horrible. And I was trying to figure out the scope of it. I've been on Zoom obviously every day now for multiple meetings and doing these interviews. So I'm slightly concerned myself about that. But is that something that you're seeing in a lot of meetings, or is that?
Yeah, I've heard that it is. So I haven't been going to a lot of meetings. So I don't know. But I have heard that it is an issue. And I think what people are doing, it's one of those things, everything has a trade-off. So I think what they're doing is they're not posting the links as publicly as they used to. Before it was just like, hey, here's a website, here it is on social media, this is how you can access this. And they're now, keeping it within these more private groups where they know everyone. And on the one hand, that's great. People need meetings and that's important. At the same time, I worry a lot about someone who isn't already in the group, isn't already in the network and needs help. And yeah.
So outreach is another issue, like getting people to seek help, not just helping the people who already have addiction and have kind of come to grips with that. That's an interesting point. Do you see changes there? Like what is happening?
It's interesting because it cuts both ways. So on the one hand, it's going to your first meeting is very scary. Like you're like, okay, basically you have to walk into a room full of strangers announce that I've entirely fucked up my life and I have this problem that I have, it feels like I have very little control over. Like, it's a lot. It's a, you know, a big ask. So I think for some people, virtual meetings allow them to sort of poke a toe in a little bit more. Like, no one has to see their face. Like, there's you can kind of get a sense of what it's about. And so on that side of it, I think it can be helpful, but at the same time, it's easier to sort of check out. You know, it's easier to avoid interacting with people, and those are important parts of it, especially when you're newly sober or trying to get sober. You really need other people as a support. At least I certainly did. So yeah, so I mean, I think there's pros and cons, but it's a challenge for sure.
Yeah, I think, you know, and you wrote about this in your article too, about human proximity. And I think we're all realizing that now. I feel like that's something we've taken for granted for a while. I think the age of social media has, you know, it's helped connect and cast a wider net, but it's also made those interactions like less meaningful, which is kind of funny to see it flip again. And now I feel like we're finding a lot of meaning in social media and video chats, and like, because we need it, you know, we need it now. So it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of this, you know, once this storm passes, to see how it changes things. And kind of in that light too, I'd like to talk about maybe like what the future of recovery could potentially look like. Not that that's on your shoulders, but I'm interested to hear your perspective. How are you going to fix this, Katie?
Yeah, I know. If only I had that much power.
Yeah. And then also maybe some advice, you know, like what I don't want this to be is just like doom and gloom and like,
here's the problem, there's no solution.
Here's the problem, like that's it. You know, we see that all day long, but I'd love to talk about some potential solutions or advice, and maybe it's something to do with routine. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I think what I would hope is that going forward, when this all is said and done, I still think virtual meetings are a great tool for people. I think that they are great in terms of accessibility. You know, you've got maybe someone who has a disability, and actually getting across town to a meeting is sort of a burden for them. Or, you know, someone who's got a bunch of kids and it's hard to make time in their schedule. I think that continuing to have that as an option is something I would hope, especially if they can sort of figure out how to get this whole like trolling thing under control, which I think they will. You know, or I think the interest in it will die. I can't. It's impossible for me to understand how it's that much fun for someone to do that.
Yeah, I don't think fun is a factor in that, but I mean, the FBI is investigating, and I know there's like there's a lot of cybersecurity interests in stopping this soon. So hopefully you're right. Yeah.
And in a way, I mean, it's kind of great that everyone is so confined to Zoom and video chat, because it'll make those authorities take this a lot more seriously, because it's not like, oh, well, that's only for people who, you know, X, Y, or Z. It's like, no, now it's for everyone. So now it's everyone's problem. So I would hope that there, you know, some version of that stays accessible to people. And then, you know, as for what people can do now, I would say, you know, just because you're, you know, socially distanced from someone, you know, we do have these great tools of getting on the phone or FaceTiming with someone, or however you want to communicate with someone. You know, if you're personally struggling with a substance, you know, calling a trusted loved one and talking to them about it, and saying, or you don't even have to bring up the substance itself. Just say, I'm having a hard time dealing with being stuck alone in my apartment. You know, just really making an effort to reach out. And I would say that I feel like the burden is even more on people who aren't in recovery or aren't struggling with an addiction to then reach out to the people in their lives who might be, or who they know is prone to depression, or, just give those people a call on a routine basis, because
Yeah.
someone else making that effort is hugely important. Because what happens either when you're depressed or you're drinking, or like you're drinking alcoholically, or you're isolated or whatever, is you start to get into this repeated mindset of no one cares about me, I'm a worthless piece of shit, like that whole thing just on a loop
Mhm.
over and over and over. So someone really making an effort to say, I care about you, I'm here, I'm thinking about you, can have more impact than one might imagine. And then I do also think like routine is really important. You know, I I've sort of been able to start doing this as I have worked from home, but it took me a long time to kind of like realize, oh, I need to like not sit around in my pajama bottoms all day, and like that I have to do the things that I would do if I were going to work,
Yeah.
just to get in that mindset. So I think things like that are also really helpful, trying to, you know, plan blocks of your day. Like, I'm going to do work from this to this. I'm going to watch a movie from this to this. I'm going to go on a walk from this to this, and just trying to fill all of that space that you now have.
Yeah, that was the first thing we did. Create a schedule, especially for, having a kid. It was like we tried to provide some sort of structure because she's used to preschool and like what she
Right.
goes through there and how regimented that is for a 5-year-old. So adding structure to her schedule allowed us to kind of plan our schedule, and then making sure we were taking time to do the things that we wouldn't necessarily be able to do. Like, we read more books, we are together as a family more, there's more puzzles, like the
Yeah.
kind of stuff that was like just omitted from our lives, unfortunately, is
Right.
making its way back in as well. So I
Yeah.
think like inserting value into that schedule.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm with you. Like, I get up as if I would like any other day, and I kind of do the Aaron Sorkin method too, where like my brain just starts turning to mud. I jump in the shower and like restart, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just finding whatever that is to like keep you in rhythm. What one question when you were saying, someone who's helping someone with a potential addiction of, reaching out and telling them like, I care about you, I'm here. I always like, I have a few people in my life who, it's pretty clear that there's an addiction issue, but they haven't dealt
Mm.
with that yet, and they haven't admitted that yet, and I think would be offended
Right.
by that. So how do you navigate that, just in general, not even like, with the whole
Right.
situation we're in with coronavirus? I mean, how do you deal with someone that you want to say, look, if you're going through anything, like, I'm here no matter what? Like, how do you do that in a way that's not offensive?
Yeah. I mean, I get asked this question a lot, and I tend to think that it is wise to not bring up the substance use, simply because I know that like I was so defensive about it. Just like
Mhm.
my brain shut down. If someone mentioned it to me, someone I loved, cared about, was a good friend, didn't matter. It was like, no, now I can't listen to anything else you're saying. I just
Yep.
have to think about ways of convincing you that I don't have a problem.
Mhm.
Um, so I tend to put that to the side and just, you know, addiction at its core is a mental health issue. So, you know, just reaching out to say like, in this case, in this isolation time, like, how are you holding up? How are you handling it? What are your days like? Just reaching out to them as a person. Hi, I heard your dog. And,
Another.
and
Yeah,
then,
sorry, go ahead.
no, it's great. And then, in general, I like, even when it's not this weird time, I would just say, uh, you know, if there's like a specific thing you want to tie it to that has to do with substance, like I saw you and, you were clearly blacked out and saying things you wouldn't have otherwise. Just, if you ever want to talk about that, or if you ever, feel like getting into that, I'm here. I'm not going to judge. I always think bringing it back to an issue of, I care about you as a person. This isn't about substances. I'm concerned about how you're doing as a person. It's, even saying like, it seems like you're hurting, it seems like you're going through something. I just want you to know that I love you, and I will talk about this with you, or, just hang out and not talk about it with you or whatever.
Yeah.
Just being a person who is there for them and not judgmental, so that if and when they are ready to start thinking about it or addressing it, they know that they have someone who's going to support them in doing that. That to me is sort of the best approach, is just, making sure that you're seeing them, as an individual who might be hurting, and letting them know that you're there if they ever need it.
That's great advice. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I always wondered that, and it's just it's a thin line. You don't want to cross that. You don't want to make them feel even worse. You don't want to back them into going deeper down that hole by like making them feel different. And yeah,
Right.
It's a tricky one. Awesome. Well, I think we should wrap it up here. I think we're around the time frame we wanted to be. I could honestly talk about this forever. It's really, thank you, first of all, for doing this. Thank you for the
No
work
problem.
that you do, for being so open and transparent and helpful in your writing, and the style of your writing is awesome too. Just
Thank you.
side note, can people find you and your work?
So you can find links to all of my work on my website, which is katiemcbride.com. It's Macbride, M-A-C, not M-C. And then I'm on Twitter way too much of the time, especially now. And that's Miss MacB. So those are two easy ways of finding what I'm working on and getting in touch.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you again. I hope we do this more regularly and not anonymously through social.
Absolutely. Yeah. And happy to talk about this stuff anytime. I feel passionately about it. So yeah,